Good morning. When you think of a country's history, you imagine fights and wars, emperors and slaves, richness and poverty. My first home is Romania. It is a country in Eastern Europe, 2000 years old. It is known to the world through Nadia Comăneci the gymnast, Mircea Eliade the great writer, Constantin Brâncuș the sculptor, and George Enescu the great classical composer. When I came to America, not too many people knew about these giants, but everybody knew about Dracula. People would ask me if I behaved like him, and I would say yes, thinking about his honesty and dignity, things that I admired in him. I didn't understand at the time why my answers seemed strange to people, but I learned fast that Dracula made them think of blood and vampire teeth. Today, I dare you to change your opinion about Dracula and get to know the real person that Vlad Tepes was. He was a patriot, an honest man, a great army commander, and above all, he loved his country and he always helped the poor. For these reasons, in my opinion, in my eyes, he is not a villain. He is not a blood-seeking vampire, but very much a hero. Vlad Tepes had many qualities that made him a hero. And first I would like to talk about his kindness. I know, it seems strange to say that he was a kind man, but he was. He always took from the rich and gave to the poor, according to Acocela 2009. He had outstanding business skills, as he encouraged the trade with the neighboring countries, and he advised everybody to do a fair trade of their goods. The famous 19th century Romanian poet Mihai Eminescu wrote a historical ballad called The Third Letter, in which he, quote, calls Vlad Tepes to come once again and save the country, end of quote. This is according to Brantley 2004. Vlad Tepes introduced a strict order in that he had rules on how people should behave and respect each other. Don't you think we need him today? He was a great military leader, known as one of the most dreaded enemies of the Ottoman Empire. Vlad Dracula organized the state, the army, the law, applying the death penalty by impaling to all those he considered enemies. Quote, highwaymen, robbers, beggars, cunning priests, and treacherous noblemen, end of quote. This is according to Miller 2000. It is true that he adopted a totalitarian leadership, but in those times he had no choice, according to Acocela 2009. Vlad's life, as well as the harness of his punishments, are at the root of long-lasting legends that made their way throughout Europe and fairly widespread throughout the world. Walking about the Vampire Association, it is worth mentioning that there is a fairly widespread that the vampire connection has been, quote, deliberately emphasized in the West to undermine a figure who, to many Romanians, is something of a national hero, end of quote, according to Miller 2004. Vlad was a man of great honesty. In fact, he was particularly known throughout the land for his, quote, fierce insistence on honesty and order, end of quote, according to Patapievich 2004. And because of that, he wanted around him to be honest too, but some of the things he did to reach his goal were drastic and put him in a bad light. The fact is that Vlad Tepes punished everybody, poor or rich, for lying, stealing, and cheating. He was very confident in the effectiveness of his law. We need someone like him today. The story I am about to tell you is the story of the Golden Cup. And after the story, you alone decide if he was a villain or a hero. The story says that Vlad Tepes once placed the golden cup on display in the central square to be used by thirsty travelers. Yes, it was a gold cup indeed. The cup was never stolen and remained entirely unmolested throughout his reign. Thirsty travelers, mothers, children, they would all stop and drink the water from the cup. None of them, however, dared to steal it, because they knew the punishment. They would have their arm. He was convinced that all of his actions worked and served as a good example for the community. He would never believe anybody who would try to tell him otherwise. He would never believe anybody who would try to tell him that his tactic was according to Bradley 2004. He was convinced that he was doing the right thing for the country and his people. We need someone like him today. I challenge you today to picture Vlad as a prince who wanted to do the best for his people. Vlad is much more than a historical figure whose name was associated with the world's most famous literary vampire. Most of all, he was an honest man. He was cruel at times, yes, but we need to place his actions in those medieval times and the reality he lived in. We can say that he did some things and took some actions that would not make him proud of himself today. But again, we have to picture him in the historical context of the time. Vlad Tepes is a significant figure in the history of Romania. And when I think of him, I picture the golden cup in the central square and how nobody dared to steal that. And now I have two questions for you. Was Vlad a hero or a psychopathic tyrant? Are his cruel actions in some way defensible? My hope is that from now on, every time you hear his name mentioned, you read the Dracula book or watch a movie with vampires, that you think about the real person who inspired all these Hollywood stories. And like Dr. Brennan said, if, quote, even for a second or two, end of quote, you think about the golden cup, then I did my job, and today I persuaded you to have an open mind and see the hero in the villain. Thank you.